I wanted to pick up a little bit where we were at yesterday as the show started, and that was just I was spent a few minutes talking about San Francisco 49ers backup quarterback Colin Kaepernick and the fact that over the weekend during an exhibition game he refused to stand for the national anthem, and he's standing by his position saying that he's simply not going to do that. I watched the NFL channel for a bit last night before I went to bed, and they had a roundtable discussion about this. One of the folks who happened to be on that panel was Kurt Warner, the former quarterback for the Rams, the Giants, and the Cardinals. And Warner, of course, was a very devout Christian when he was playing professional football. I'm sure that many of you were aware of his background as far as that goes. And Warner was saying, look, when I was playing, there were people who were probably not comfortable with my faith in the locker room, but they pretty well let me go about my business. So he said, I don't think that these claims that this is going to be disruptive to an organization are necessarily true. Warner, by the way, is in favor of standing for the national anthem. But what got me is the rest of the panel. There were four or five people on it. Kurt Warner was the only white guy. And I'm not saying that black people aren't patriotic. A great many of them are. Happened to see Alan West on TV last night. And of course, Alan West is saying that Kaepernick really needs to get his nose back in place. It's a pretty big nose, by the way, but he said he needs to get his nose back in joint and start realizing the blessings that this country brings to him. However, the people who were on that panel last night, when you bring in folks like Jim Brown, I mean, my gosh, the guy's got to be 80, 81 years old now, and he sits on that panel and runs down the United States. Here's Brown, who made a lot of money playing football, then left and became an actor with very little acting talent, made a lot of money doing that, was known for many, many years for his abuse of women. And here he is talking about how terrible the United States is for all these various athletes of color. You just roll your eyes in that situation and you ask yourself, where did they find these people? Couldn't they get a more balanced vantage point? Now, I was listening to Rush too while I was driving home yesterday. Limbaugh commented the Dallas Cowboys were told they could not wear a sticker on their helmets honoring the Dallas police officers who were killed in a racial attack. That happened a couple of months ago. Dallas was told you can't do this because the league just can't have everybody willy-nilly violating uniform policy. And yet, as Limbaugh said, it's okay to come on the field and do your Black Lives Matter, hands in the air, don't shoot, even though that was based on a lie. And it's all right for Kaepernick to do this. Some players said that they were going to join Kaepernick, but now it appears they've had some subtle pressure, and that subtle pressure has them saying instead they're going to play football, stand for the national anthem, and keep their mouths shut. Maybe behind the scenes, the NFL is realizing that this is perhaps a public relations disaster waiting to happen. And when Kaepernick, when he gets let go and he ends up signing in Canada, he can make his own decisions about singing the national anthem of that country, which, as I said yesterday, is likely his destination because nobody in the NFL seems to want the guy right now. The 49ers tried to shop him for at least the past year, and here he is, still sitting on the bench, getting a little bit of playing time now and then, but that's hoping that someone will see him and he'll have a brilliant performance one preseason game and they'll be able to dump him off as a backup with the Eagles or with somebody else who's perpetually looking for someone to carry splinters on the bench. I have this today. This is from the Daily Signal. Frederick Douglass, one of the great people in this country who was probably among the first civil rights leaders, close friend of President Lincoln, had been a slave, became a free man. The writer says Douglass was known to frequently play the Star-Spangled Banner on his violin for his grandchildren in the years after the war. He said in an 1871 speech at Arlington National Cemetery that if the Star-Spangled Banner floats only over free American citizens in every quarter of the land, and our country has before it a long and glorious career of justice, liberty, and civilization, we are indebted to the unselfish devotion of the noble army. For the most part, the writer says, fans and players in the NFL embrace a similar view of the United States. Now, Douglass is long dead. You've got some liberal whack jobs out there claiming the song is racist. They're referring to some stanzas later in the song. You may have seen the video floating around YouTube over the last few years. Herman Cain is speaking at a Tea Party rally probably 4 or 5 years ago, and a fellow got up and sang several stanzas of the national anthem. Now, it wasn't the national anthem until the early 1930s. Was a popular song, and it was the Navy song for a long time as well, but it didn't become the national anthem until the 1930s. So it's only been in the last 100 years that it was adopted and took on that much more vaunted role in our lives. But the fact of the matter is to claim it's racist and that it celebrates the killing of black people. I remember being a kid and seeing those other stanzas. I have no idea what that kook is talking about. It's 8:12. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's as if you're a liberal. You can't hate America enough and everything America stands for and all the symbols of America. Now you've got schools that say you can't fly the American flag at football games because some guy named Jose might not like it. Saw that on television last night. Good golly, folks, have we lost our minds? This is the United States of America. That flag is the flag of the United States. It represents the United States. I can remember reading the book Flags of Our Fathers, and I actually, when I was a younger reporter working in the business in the early days, I went to a reunion of Iwo Jima troops, mainly Marines and some sailors who fought in that battle, and I asked them what they thought. And at that time, I believed in, well, it's everybody's right to go, if they want to urinate on the flag, they want to use it as toilet paper, if they want to burn it, whatever, that's their right. And of course, that's protected by the courts. And why would I get bothered by it? But then I talked to these old veterans, and they told me as they were hunkered down in that volcanic ash and not knowing if they were going to make it off that island or not. And all of a sudden, they heard the horns of ships bleating. And they looked up and they saw that flag going up atop Mount Suribachi. And they said nothing in the world ever in their lives since then has replicated that huge surge of adrenaline and patriotism that they got in that one moment, pride, and realized they could continue the fight. Telephone number to reach our program, 736-0300. And that's what Colin Kaepernick is pissing on. 736-0300. That's the telephone number to reach our program. Bill Colley with you on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 57 on our way today to a high, get this, of 95, but that may be our last day above 90 degrees. We have a caller with us. You're up next, and you're on the air.
Jim Harbaugh had a comment. He says, I respect his right to do it, but don't agree with the fact that he's doing it. And then he, in a later tweet, he backed off. Jim Harbaugh seems like one of the toughest guys and you say to yourself, how could a guy like that, who I would think, he was, a patriotic man, but you see, when he spoke his piece, then he backed it off. The peer pressure, or whatever pressure it is, the social pressure, just like that way they swatted Kurt Schilling, and he's been, he's out of the situation now. We don't even see him anymore because he spoke his piece. And you see, I guess it's like this. We either save our job or speak our piece, but not either one when we're in the public light. I mean, who the hell is going to speak their piece and mean it and be patriotic and stand up for America? Just us peons? Thanks, Bill.
Hey, thank you much for the telephone call. And yes, I remember many, many years ago when my daughter was just a wee little girl. A group of us decided to go plant flags for Memorial Day weekend at the local county veterans cemetery. And we were going around the cemetery, and this was hard scrabble ground. The county had bought a cheap plot of land, and veterans could be buried there for $400. And they get the headstone that's flat to the ground because it's easy to mow and maintain. And it was just done as a means of honoring them because some of them just couldn't afford it. And then we got to one grave, and I started we had to use butter knives to loosen the ground and then put the flags in. And I looked down, and there was the name Floyd B. Schwartzwalder. Now, in football history, he may not be well known today, but he was the last fellow to ever win a national championship in football at Syracuse University. He actually coached Jim Brown and Ernie Davis. That was in 1959. I knew him vaguely as a young reporter, didn't get to know him well. He'd been retired a long time, but he used to be at the stadium quite a bit still to watch football games. He could have died, and they could have had a huge obelisk dedicated to this man because of his celebrity in that community. Instead, he chose to be dumped in a $400 grave with his fellow veterans. That night I went home and I Googled him, started reading about him on the computer. Do you know this? That in Normandy, there are towns in Normandy where his name is on plaques because of the heroism when he was with the 82nd Airborne and he landed behind enemy lines on D-Day. That is what people in football used to represent. And now you've got this whiner Kaepernick making $114 million, and he can't stand up when the national anthem is played. 816, you're next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. Uh, these football players and these celebrities that don't like where they live, we need to get a donation going and help them get their first bus ticket to Canada or wherever they want to go. And did you notice Harry Reid, his comment on he thinks there's some hacking going on from foreign?
Yeah.
Well, I figured out why he don't want that, because they don't like competition in rigging elections.
Yes, they don't. And poor Harry Reid, still serving for a few more months. Dementia is a terrible thing, and, he perhaps should have gone a little sooner. Thank you for the call. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Good morning, Bill. The very thing that he doesn't want to stand for gave him the right to sit down. And, that's his thing. And I've said over and over that we cannot legislate morality or anything else. If he dislikes the country, then he should find a way out. But we can't stop him from doing that, nor can he stop us from saying that he's been a horse's patoot. And everything that he's saying, that the reason why he doesn't want to stand is a narrative that has been twisted so bad that they don't want to go and study and find the truth to the Constitution, where they say it's racist, when majority of them didn't like it, but they had to do it in order to get things moving forward. And it was ended. And who ended it? People in the U.S. I mean, they don't like studying this stuff, and then they sit there and say,
Nope. Thank you for the call, but we've really dumbed it down, and that's the thing, is that a lot of our young people simply, I'll talk about this later. There's a good piece in the Daily Signal as well about that, about the lack of knowledge people have about history. Got a break coming up, so I've got to get to a bit of business. I have a couple of copies of Glenn Beck's latest novel, Agenda 21, which is a novel about what life will be like in America a generation or two after Agenda 21 is adopted and our government no longer exists and we are controlled by worldwide elites. It's an autographed copy. And if you can be the first caller during the break, we'll make it third caller during the break at 736-0300 to tell me in what city the United Nations Charter was signed, you will win a copy of this Glenn Beck book, Agenda 21. You'll have to pick it up at our studios. That's the only caveat. But if you call me at 736-0300 during the commercial break, and you can tell me, caller number 3, what city the United Nations Charter was signed in, you'll win a copy of Glenn Beck's latest book, Agenda 21.